So, Arnaldo, I guess the next question is when you first expanded into Mexico, you were in specifically the fair market value leasing game, and in particular, technology. So, what was the state of FMV leasing in Mexico when you started, and what was the posture of the domestic Mexican banks relative to discounting these transactions? That you mentioned, Kenny Steinbeck, probably, he and Ken Ponticus, some of the first movers in the United States of getting banks to fund non-recourse discounting and fund non-recourse FMV deals. So what was the state there, and what were the state of the banks?
Well, when we started, since we started during the tequila crisis, the FMV players were mainly auto finance type companies who had a very difficult time getting any kind of liquidity. And the banks weren't providing any type of non-recourse financing. I mean, they weren't providing any financing, let alone non-recourse financing.
And as far as FMV leasing goes, as a lessor, were you the only ones there, or were there somebody else there?
Well, there were other global players. CIT was there doing mainly vendor programs, G Capital doing mainly industrial type equipment, and some aircraft, and IGF.
I got it. So I guess, so you've spent a lot of time in Mexico and for two various companies, right? I mean, El Camino and CSI. Was there ever a point that you thought, you know what, I've got Mexico handled, and now that we've got the model down, we can take it somewhere else? Or did you immediately start to evolve outside of Mexico? Give us a sense. What kind of progression was that?
Basically, we ended up following our customers. I mean, it wasn't like a master plan. It was like we have lots of opportunities, and we saw the market opportunity. We had multinational accounts. We had vendors asking us to support them in these markets. So it was really more an issue of following them and taking advantage of these opportunities that existed in the markets. So, I mean, it was no rocket scientist, and we were just following the opportunities.
Okay, so it wasn't a matter of a very planned, we'll stay in Mexico for 3 years, figure it out, and then we'll take one country at a time and figure that out before we go to another country.
I mean, we stayed in Mexico. We focused on Mexico first. That was very important. And so we were there for about a year and a half before we really started investing in other markets, because, of course, we wanted to validate that we had these opportunities. And so it took a while. But once we validated that, we just pursued those other markets.
So here's, I guess, a follow-on question to that. At the most, how many countries were you greenfielding at the same time in general? What was the most at any one time?
If you consider Brazil and Central America, because Central America is like 5 countries, right?
Right.
Costa Rica, El Salvador, yeah, Guatemala, Panama, Nicaragua. So I would say about 5.
All at one time?
All at one time. But Brazil took a long time. Brazil, you have to get a license, and you have to wait like 2 years. So it's kind of a different process. I mean, you could say you're like starting around 5 at the same time, but you really don't finish. They don't start and end at the same time.
Right. So either you had an immense amount of patience or just a great sense of humor.
Yeah, I think I had both.